NTV.
14 minutes past 8 a.m. We do continue with Wednesday and youths. And of course, we are discussing things that get youths engaged. One of them is abuse of drugs. And that is becoming rampant, especially here in Uganda. Now, the use of toxic substances among adolescents is raising serious alarms in the public health system. And the global burden of disease is projected that tobacco, alcohol, and illicit drugs are respectively second, 9th and 20th leading causes of mortality globally. Now, just in Uganda, you get to look at these very substances increasingly being absorbed by youths. Now, we do have Elwa Louis, the director for Focus on Recovery Uganda, here to speak to us about this growing burden of drug abuse. Good morning to you, Louis.
Yes, good morning.
How are you?
I'm good.
So I'll start from, digging into your personal life. When were you first introduced to drugs?
My first exposure with alcohol was at 14. I think that was senior one. And I had escorted a family member to a party. That's the first time I got high. But it disorganized me, and I didn't really get into the habit. But sometime in my senior two, at the age of 15, that is when I started experimenting with friends who had already had the experience. And I think that is when I really got dragged into the habit, when the meltdown started. Yeah. Okay.
And for how long were you actually on this drug use?
13 years, because I used alcohol, tobacco, and just a very little bit of weed till the age of 28, so 13 years, yeah.
Okay. All right. So there's always the bad end of usage of drugs. It always cuts you off certain things. What are the things that you actually lost because you were actively using drugs?
The usual, what almost everybody experiences. Interrupted education, in and out of school, because my dad was very tough, when I finally got a job, I couldn't keep the job. Then I met a nice person I got engaged to, who patiently waited for me for 5 years. So around that time when I lost my job and my drinking escalated, she also called it quits. And that threw me into a depression, basically worsened my drinking. I had become basically destitute. Friends had abandoned me, family had distanced themselves from me. I was just moving in the night like a bat. Sometimes I would sleep on bar benches, Sometimes I would time friends in the morning, those I knew would be around, go and, crash at their places in the morning. Yeah, so I hit rock bottom pretty hard like many people do.
Okay. And how did you recover at the end of the day?
I got to a point where I could see myself going. I saw that this alcohol was killing me. And I used to see friends I went to school with, friends I grew up with, doing quite well. And I just could not look in the mirror and acknowledge who I had become. But I tried on my own to quit. At a certain point, I even went for 3 months dry. But because I did not have the necessary tools to keep sober, I relapsed. And it really wasn't. At that point, I recognized that I had a problem and I couldn't do it on my own. I just didn't know where to find help or that there was a solution. So I met a friend who I used to drink with, and he looked different, and the transformation was amazing. So when I asked him where he'd gotten that miracle, he told me about rehab. So I ran back home, fell on my knees, told my parents, please forgive me, take me for treatment. And 2 days later, I was in a rehabilitation center. Yeah, and I've never looked back since.
All right, now that's the wonderful testimony from which we want to understand the deepness of drug abuse in Uganda. With Focus on Recovery Uganda, tell us how big this problem is in this country.
It's really quite big, and it's increasing by the day. I don't know, society has really changed, you know, really changed. Nowadays there are more substances than we used to have in our times. Drugs of abuse are in the house, and the parents don't know because these are legal drugs.
Which kind of drugs are these in particular? The ones
prescription drugs, especially painkillers, things like tramadol, some cough syrups, especially the ones that are codeine based. Kids are seriously abusing these drugs, and parents can't tell because you think this is just normal medicine for pain or to sort out a cold, you know. So the kind of usage of nowadays has evolved. It's easy for kids to get high. We've been to international schools where there are black markets for these prescription drugs, and interestingly, a good number of them are actually run by girls. You know, in our times, a parent would come, look at your eyes, try to, you know, detect something on your breath. If someone has popped tablets, how are you going to
detect that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So which are the most used substances right now on the market?
Alcohol is still the most abused drug, and weed, arguably, you know, there's, what do they call it, shisha?
Shisha.
I find it hard to pronounce it, shisha. Then there is also a growing dependency on amphetamines, that is crystal meth. Crystal meth, yeah, those are the most abused. But now those that can afford, or those from affluent families, are toying with cocaine. So we also have a lot of heroin in the ghetto, and the most prone people are those using weed, because now the adulterated heroin is less in the sticks of weed. That's marijuana.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So in January, research has shown us that individuals that are using drug or even abusing some of these drugs that you have mentioned are challenged with mental disorders and also have more severe psychiatric symptoms, and they are difficult to treat. So is this true? And I know that from your personal experience, maybe that has been your case. So let us know what your case was in terms of mental disorders, psychiatric challenges, and then what you actually generally receive with Focus on Recovery Uganda.
Okay. Addiction itself is a mental illness. It's a substance use disorder or a behavioral use disorder. It's a word for a combination of, either a combination of the two. Behavioral disorder can be sex addiction, gambling disorder, food addiction, or one of them. So in my case, I presented mainly with addiction and some of its symptoms like depression, and mine was substance-induced depression. And yes, substance use disorders also can co-occur with other mental disorders or can cause these disorders. For example, depression can lead to substance use disorder. Somebody with bipolar or schizophrenia can develop a substance use disorder or a behavioral disorder. But also substance use disorder can lead to, for example, what we call psychosis. You know, loss of mental faculties. The quickest way, I usually tell people, the quickest way to lose your mind is to use weed, because after some time you definitely start losing proper use of your mental faculty. So at Focus on Recovery Uganda, because we run to rehab, inpatient rehab centers, so we take patients through the normal process of first detoxification, where you try to clear the body of the substances and help the person deal with the withdrawal symptoms. Because when you cut the person off
immediately,
yes, sometimes it can have dire effects. So, and also detoxification helps the person get back to normal body functions like sleep, recover the normal body functions, sleep, regain their appetite. You know, so after that, then we go through psychotherapy, and this is usually a long process because without overhauling the psychological infrastructure of an individual, changing that mindset, they are not going to recover. So it has to be a total cognitive shift from this thing that I've always depended on to this life across the street that involves me just using my own resources or even community resources, my own abilities to stay sober. Yeah.
All right. Oh, Louis, still in regards to research, some research has actually indicated and suggested that illicit substance use is not initiated. If it's not initiated by the age of 21, a person may actually never use some of these substances. How true is this?
Yes, delayed use is to the advantage of the individual because the human brain is not fully developed till the age of about 24, 25, depending on which research you're reading. And usually, when the brain is not fully mature, it's more prone to addiction, and it's more prone to mental illness. So the more you delay usage, the higher your chances of not suffering from substance use disorder. But again, you also have to look at the other side. There are three factors that conspire to cause addiction. That is availability, environment, and genetics. Now, for addiction to take place, any of those two factors have to interact, you know? Now, for those that are genetically predisposed, irrespective of the age, when you start, you know, chances are that you're going to get hooked are very high because of the predisposition. And also you can look at other factors, like somebody might also start at the age of 25. That how much are you taking? The simple formula is too much, too often, too long. So if you start late, irrespective, and you're taking too much, too often, and for a long time, you're still going to cross over.
Okay, all right. We have situations such as COVID-19 that led people to perhaps have hope in some of these substances, such as the weed that you have mentioned. Some people, you know, were going around saying that it could help, you know, treat COVID-19, or have it as a tea, it's going to help you, you know, recover from COVID-19, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, they get to be hooked on these substances, and yet if they're now above 21, the challenges could be there. So what could be the causes of such, and then what are actually those factors in general that could get a person above the age of 21 to get hooked onto substance use?
If I got you right, you're asking what causes people to think that way. You know, pandemics such as COVID lead to desperation. They are highly infectious, and people will do anything. There's been an increasing debate about the healing properties of marijuana. True, marijuana has some healing properties. There is what we call CBD. That is basically I forgot what it is in full. CBD, that's the healing component of marijuana. Then there's THC, tetrahydrocannabinol. That is the psychoactive component of marijuana. That's what gets you hooked. Now, for marijuana to be effective in healing, the CBD has to act or react with at least 1% of THC. That is when it's most effective. Now, you find that the weed that people use here, in whichever form, has 25% THC, highly addictive. Actually, in our times, the weed we took was 12% THC. So if you find that one that is chemically manipulated, like what happens in the Western world, where there's just a very small percentage of THC, those can help.
Okay, we're continuing this conversation after this short. All right, thank you so much. Now we go on ground, joining Ivan Walunyoro, who is in Entebbe, and he's going to be letting us know about the integration of Kiswahili as well as the morale of teachers in Entebbe. But before we get to Ivan, I want to finish with Louis here in regards to the increase of substance abuse here in Uganda. Now we've looked at, the ones that get hooked onto it below 15, the ages of 15 and maybe latest 18. But now we do have the adults that find themselves in a predicament where they get to be introduced or hooked to some of these substances. What could be the major two factors that could lead to that?
For adults, basically societal pressures, lack of employment. These people lack what to do, and the stress, you'll find people entering bars as early can be, and others even sleeping there. Lack of employment, they are redundant. What are they doing? So it's a tough time amongst people, and even parental pressures. Your kids are expecting this, you can't provide. So you find that so many people are resorting to substance use that has led to abuse because of what is happening today.
Okay, all right. So as Focus on Recovery Uganda, how are you actually dealing with the problem of drug abuse practically?
Yeah, we have outreaches to schools and other sectors of the communities. And also what we are doing, we run treatment centers, what is commonly known as rehabilitation centers. And this is helpful, but it's just a drop in the ocean. I, for one, can tell you that treatment works. It has helped several people, but it's no guarantee. So you find that it usually just caters for a small portion of the problem. How many treatment centers do we have in the country today compared to the number of people that need help? You see? So we need an increase in resources that can help people. And as Recovery Uganda now, we run 3 centers, and hopefully at a certain point we shall have centers all over the country, fully equipped with the groups that can offer community interventions to people. Yeah.
All right. So how does one get in touch with Focus on Recovery Uganda?
Yeah, you can call me directly on 0773 001 684, or you can check us out on Facebook, Recovery Uganda. Yeah. Okay.
All right. You had mentioned something about environment, availability, and genetics. Could you just throw some more light into that?
Yeah. These are the 3 factors that conspire to cause addiction, and any 2 of them can lead to addiction. Environment. If the environment is conducive for use, and let's say the substance is available, someone is going to use. And that can lead to addiction. If somebody is genetically predisposed and there are drugs available, when they start, it's just like turning on a switch. So any 2 of them, can work together to get someone hooked.
All right. Thank you so much, Elwa Louis from Focus on Recovery Uganda. And of course, he's shared his contacts. You can just Google them and you will get that information and help that brother, that sister, that parent, that friend of yours that is actually struggling with substance abuse.